So in effect, then, we have this situation where there is a huge proliferations of light weapons, not just in Nigeria, but across the sub-region.
Across
How do we,
West Africa, yes.
how do we contain that? Where do we start from?
I'm sorry, I've lost audio.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you.
Great. Now I'm saying that we have this big challenge, not just for Nigeria, but for the sub-region, the West African sub-region, where we have this huge proliferation of light weapons. What must be done to contain that, to ensure that not just elections in Nigeria, but the, elections across other member states is violence-free?
Proliferation of light weapons, as you know, is one of the other factors that would determine violence in Nigeria. Mopping up light weapons is going to be a great challenge for all the governments of West Africa, and they must work together. The proliferation of the borders and ensuring that communities are swept clean and people who hold weapons are given incentives to give up their weapons also becomes very important. When people feel secure, then the weapons become less relevant. So the question is, do citizens feel secure as citizens in their country? Are we looking at the other factors that contribute to this? The insecurity in the various communities, disenfranchisement of communities from being able to democratically run their country, not just vote, but democratically decide their own destiny is also a factor.
In your view, again, do you think that politicians have a crucial role to play to try to see that violence is averted in 2019, especially for Nigeria?
Oh, yes, they have a great role to play. And the Joint Action Committee is working to ensure that they are brought to book if they violate electoral laws and also if they incite violence. They have a very large role to play.
To INEC as well, apart from the politicians?
Well, INEC definitely has a chunk of the role to play. But then, of course, you know the dynamics going on at INEC right now. The funding of INEC remains a real problem, which might also instigate violence. Because if at this point, INEC does not have the resources with which to mobilize its forces, with which to implement its electoral plans, it's going to go into a last-minute rush, and they will be prone to mistakes. Being prone to mistakes also opens room for electoral fraud and electoral violence. And the conception of the policy of the optics of how INEC is played out would also affect how political violence happens or does not happen in this country.
In your conversations, you're talking to INEC, you're talking to the politicians. Are the civil society organizations talking to the electorate? Because at the end of the day, the violence is either perpetrated or caused in the midst of the electorate. Are they being spoken to so that they do not allow themselves to be a part of this whole mess?
So yes, we're definitely speaking to the electorate, and that's where we started from. That they do not become pawns on this board. They definitely do not need to be pawns. All every single Nigerian wants, or an average Nigerian wants, is a peaceful country that they can call their own, in which they can prosper, in which they can pass on citizenship to their children. Violence is not part of our dynamics, and it's usually instigated by politicians. And so, yes, we've been having conversations with communities across board throughout the country, especially in the communities in the states most vulnerable to violence in this election.
Okay, in your recommendations, what recommendations do you have for the country in general as regards ensuring this doesn't happen?
Well, first thing I would say that our security forces must show themselves as being neutral, and that their allegiance is to the Nigerian state and not to political governments. So, again, to INEC, that they exhibit a similar spirit of neutrality, of transparency, and of accountability. For the political parties, that it is not a do-or-die affair, and it's not winners take all. At the end of the day, the Nigerian state winning, the Nigerian state prospering, is all most of us desire. I wouldn't say all of us. that most of us desire. And so we must work together to ensure that in spite of our differences, in spite of our ideologies, and that it must be issue-based politics this time around. And that we're monitoring, we're watching, we are documenting, and we will seek justice even to the highest levels. And so that's our shout out to the political parties.
Let me pick you on this one. What your last submission, you say that the security formations is basically the army, the police must see themselves as neutral in this whole journey to nationhood and, of course, the elections. But in your view, do you think that there is a level of, should I say, tilt now, if you will, of the Nigerian military?
Well, that's the perception right now. There's a definite perception of a tilt of both the police and the army. For example, Mr. Deji Adeyoju was arrested for criticizing the government. You've got what happened in the Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly as well, and the complicity of the police force. Those do not look good right now, and they do not suggest neutrality. And you've got a few more to reckon with. And they don't suggest neutrality at all.
Always a good morning to speak with you. We've been speaking to Mrs. Abiodun Baiyewu. She's the co-convener, Civil Society Joint Action Committee. Thank you so much indeed for talking to us from our Abuja studios. And Sunrise Daily will be back in just a moment. Join us again.